in my opinion, if a kid is not locked solid and I am going to be this when I grow up, if there's any kind of doubt there, I would much prefer them go into manufacturing, go into the skilled trades, because you're going to get a great foundational career that you'll always be able to feed your family with, and then you can do the school stuff later. So that way you're not going into debt on something you may or may not choose as a career long term.
Hi there, welcome to another episode of Chinatown 2.0, a show about Chinese immigrants thriving. I'm your host, Richard Yan. As longtime viewers of this program know, I don't only interview Chinese diasporas, even though this show set out with a focus on that group. From time to time, I also talk to people I find interesting, regardless of their backgrounds. Today is such an example. I interviewed my friend Erin Cuellar. Erin is Director of Operations at STERIS, a manufacturer of medical devices. At the time of this interview, she was Senior Operations Manager, also at STERIS, and her role was essentially that of a plant manager. Her responsibilities included supervising teams, managing KPIs, and maintaining quality controls. Erin comes from a very different world than I do. She dropped out of college, worked at a local manufacturing site, joined an apprenticeship program, got her journeyman's card, which is sort of like a full license to practice in the trades, and moved from state to state for employment in manufacturing. In the course of 13 years, she moved between 5 different states. At least one of the moves was the result of a plant shutdown thanks to outsourcing. But Erin and her family, which included a husband and 3 children, were fully resilient in transitioning to new homes, new jobs, and new schools. In fact, about a year after our interview, Erin moved to Pennsylvania to become Director of Operations at her company. This goes on to show how long it's been since we had this interview. But I became interested in the trades in recent years after noticing and following the works of Mike Rowe and Andrew Yang, who both highlight a change in the mix of American jobs available, as well as people willing to undertake those jobs. In the US, there just seem to be fewer opportunities in the trade sector, and even fewer young people looking to enter those fields. Mike Rowe looks to encourage the youths to get into these areas, whereas Andrew Yang sees the loss of these opportunities as the force that hollowed out Middle America, which disenfranchised large swaths of the population, leading to rising support for the wings of the political spectrums. Needless to say, the topic of jobs in the trades area is an important one, and that's why I became interested and ultimately found my way to this circle, eventually befriending Erin. In today's conversation, Erin and I talked about what it's like to work in manufacturing plant, her experience of working in the trades as a rare species of a woman, her moves around the country in pursuit of various manufacturing jobs, how does she think about raising her kids, and why she thinks it is a good idea for young people to consider a career in the trades. I hope you enjoy listening to this episode. If you like the content and want to support this show, the best way to do so is to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notification. The YouTube algorithm will take such actions into account and help this show reach more people. Thank you.
Hi, Erin. How's it going? Welcome to Chinatown 2.0.
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, great for having you. So please briefly tell us about your current job and what you like about it.
Okay, my current job, I am the Senior Operations Manager for a medical device company. And this was kind of like my dream job. I've been going to school for a long time. I'm essentially like a plant manager. There's roughly 50 people in this building. About 20 of them report to me. The other half is in our engineering side and have a different reporting structure. So I handle all of the operations and materials for the site. And
can you talk a little bit about what the plant does, like what it makes and what the people here do in the plant?
Sure. Our building does operating room integration equipment. So we build the computers that you would see, the computers and the audio visual that you would see in an operating room. So there's a lot of our stuff, the surgeons in teaching hospitals, when they're sharing content with their students, a lot of that stuff is used through our product. So we mainly do assembly and programming of the equipment.
Okay, very cool. I guess when I see equipment like EKG machines or, gosh, what are the names of the things that they put on pregnant mother's belly to get the baby pictures out?
Oh, the ultrasound.
The
Yeah.
ultrasound things, yes, the ultrasound machines. Do you guys make anything like those? Anything
In
adjacent to those products?
in some of our other facilities, so we are all over the world. We've got several facilities in the United States. We have facilities in France, England, Finland, Brazil. We have several facilities in different facets of the medical world. So in the United States, we've got a facility that does the tables, the lights, the booms that you would see in an operating room. We've got a couple of facilities that'll do the sterilization of different medical devices. We've got some that do the endoscopy side of the medical world. So, and it's an ever-changing and growing kind of industry. So it's kind of a neat place to be.
Well, so believe it or not, a lot of the listeners of this podcast might not have been inside of a plant, a manufacturing plant, if ever. So if you can just talk a little bit about what it's like to work in the plant, a manufacturing plant, and being a manager of a plant, that'd be helpful.
Sure. So there's usually always movement. Somebody's moving around doing something. Our facility's pretty small. We're probably about 15 to 20,000 square feet on this side. And we have lines. So different
Assembly
product will
lines?
travel. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So different product will travel down different lines. And it just kind of depends on the demand for that day on how many people you'll see in that specific space. So it'll come in, the material will go onto racks or shelves, and then we've got folks that'll pick the parts off of those racks and get it set up for the folks on the assembly line. The assembly line will then do their thing, make it into the finished good, and then it'll go over to our shipping department and they'll get it all packaged up and ready to ship out to the customer.
So as the plant manager, do you also oversee the team members to make sure they are not absent? And do you also do quality control? Do you work with like the mandate? I don't know what's the right word for it, meaning like, you know, the quotas, the number of goods that are supposed to be done at the end of the day. Do you check on those things? Do you have metrics that you supervise on?
Yes, absolutely. So we have, they're called KPIs, key performance indicators. So, you know, did we ship the parts on time? Did we have good quality? We're all of our people here. We have different metrics that we measure every day. In my position, I have, it's a higher kind of level just to make sure, you know, were we green or red in those specific areas, but I have supervisors and team leads that work for me that help with the more detail out on the floor. Like if somebody's sick, who are we going to put in their place to make sure that we can get that job done?
Okay.
So
Understood.
yeah.
Great. So offline, I know that you didn't get started in your career as a plant manager. In fact, you went through many different iterations for different types of jobs around the country. So tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are now. Now, maybe emphasize on the fact that you moved around in the last 13 years or so across 5 different states.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Michigan. And after high school, I attempted to go to college and found that my priorities didn't really line up with what it takes to complete a degree.
Can you get a little bit more specific? What do you mean by how your priorities didn't line up with the degree?
I was a young kid and made some poor choices just with time management and those types of things. It was kind of crazy because I had a full ride. I had a full scholarship to a school, and so I went to that school and attempted to do pre-med. I was also going to school to become an EMT. I was working full-time and then doing all of the not so wise choices a college student would make. So I just found it just didn't, I couldn't hang. And after a semester, I decided to leave and kind of figure out a different path. So I started working at a local manufacturing site, and I was super excited because I was making way more money than my friends were. I had insurance, which back then they didn't have insurance for everybody up until 26. Once you hit 18, you didn't have insurance.
What year was this? Was this 2005, 2004?
This was actually in 98 and 99.
Okay.
So yeah, so I started working at that manufacturing facility, and within about 6 months, I learned that they had apprenticeship programs. And so I was like, hey, cool, this sounds more fun than just being on the production line all the time. So let's go check this out. And I went down to the HR department and said, hey, I want to sign up. And I'd only at that particular time heard of an electrician. I knew what the electricians did. So I was going to sign up for that. And they told me that the wait list was 2 years. So I was like, well, what else do you have? Because I don't want to wait 2 years. I'm kind of impatient. And
Out of curiosity, why is the wait list that long? Is it a matter of they don't have enough people to train you, or is it a matter of they just don't need that many electricians?
so there were, I'm trying to think back. This was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
They had a maximum amount that they allowed into the program at any given time. And so the electricians, they got paid the most. And basically once you were in there, you were kind of set for your career. So if somebody didn't retire, there wasn't an opening to bring in a new person.
Yeah.
So that's why the wait list was so long. They were basing that on the retirement age of some of the folks that were in that team.
Yeah, I wonder if it's a matter of protecting the incumbent so they don't lose out to competition, if you will, or it's just a matter of how maybe your area didn't need that many electricians to begin with. I don't know.
It was a plant apprenticeship. So it wasn't like I've learned in California, they have these apprenticeship programs where you can go to the community college or go to the unions out here and do an apprenticeship through the local union. This was specific to that plant. So it was sponsored by the union. So you'd get a card from the plant that said, hey, you're now a journeyman for this through the plant, but then you'd get another card from the union that says you're certified through the union as well.
Yeah, I guess the plant had an idea for how many electricians they need, hence the wait list. Anyway,
Right.
So go ahead, please.
Right. So I said, well, what do you have open? And they started going through the list. Plumber, I'm like, no, I don't really want to play with pipes. The toolmakers had this amazing sense to detail. And I was like, I don't know about that one. They came to millwright and I was like, ooh, what's a millwright? And so they kind of explained.
Tell us.
So yeah, so they explained it's kind of the jack of all trades for that facility. So they're the mechanics, the industrial mechanics for the equipment. They also set up like new lines. They move the equipment around so that if you needed to set up a new line or tear down a line or modify a line. We also did
A line is an assembly line, right?
Well, there it was more in depth. So they had a full machine shop. They had a paint shop. It was more than just assembly at that facility. They had a welding department. They had robots, all that kind of fun stuff. So
what does that facility do? What does it output?
At that facility, we did the refrigeration units that go on top of buildings.
Okay. Refrigeration units.
So like compressors.
Okay. So they basically help with AC?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And that plant's no longer there.
Okay.
So yeah, if you need a table built or you need something built for that line or a fixture or something like that, we got to do all that stuff. You kind of got to play in a lot of different areas. That's where I learned how to weld. That's where I learned how to read blueprints and all of that fun stuff. So
Erin, sorry, just to clarify on the concept of a line though, you said it's not an assembly line. So a line what is a line? I still don't understand.
So like in my facility, an assembly line, you just assemble parts.
Right.
In that facility, there were assembly lines, but there were also like welding lines. There were also big, huge machines that would run specific parts, not necessarily on a line.
Okay. Because you mentioned how you were a jack of all trades, you would work in different lines. So the line you're referring to, a line is an area within the facility that does some specialty.
Correct. Maybe I should word that differently, more like a department.
Okay.
Different departments within the facility.
Okay, now you're speaking my language.
Okay, all right. Cool. So yeah, so they said, hey, we can take you in here. They have openings. They're going to be doing interviews in the next few weeks for this. And I was like, okay, cool, sign me up. And I didn't know at the time, but I was the first and only female to ever apply or get accepted into this program in that facility. And at that time, that facility had been around about 80 years.
Okay.
So,
and this was when you were 20 years old?
Correct.
Okay, right. And this was in Michigan, right?
Correct.
Which town was this?
Tecumseh.
Tecumseh. Okay. Can't say.
So southeast, like right around here.
Okay.
That's the cool
perfect.
part about Michigan.
Nice. Right.
So yeah, so I went through the interview process. They had a panel interview. You had a mix of salary folks from the company and some of the journeymen that you would end up working with. And you go through this whole interview process. They test your mechanics. They test your tool knowledge. They do all of this fun stuff. And then they tell you yes or no.
Okay. And a journeyman is basically a full-timer?
So a journeyman is a person who has completed the apprenticeship program.
Okay. Okay. But
Yeah,
is there
so,
like
like-
another level beyond a journeyman?
Probably at that facility, you were either an apprentice or a journeyman. There were no other differentiations there. I'm assuming at certain places they might like have a senior level.
Yeah. I guess corporate speak, it would be like an intern versus a full-time. That's the way I
Yes,
map the
correct.
concepts. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yep.
All right.
Yeah, you basically have no rights like an intern while you're going through an apprenticeship program. You got to do
Right.
everything that they tell you to do and all that kind of fun stuff.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah.
You do get paid as an apprentice though, right?
Yes. Yeah. Not as well as a journeyman,
The
but yes, you
journeyman.
do get paid.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. There's no way I could have done that without getting paid.
Right.
So-
Right.
So yeah, so I went through and completed the program, and I want to say I earned my journeyman's card we left in 2004. So it was like Christmas time, 2003. And that story in itself was kind of crazy because I was the only female in all of the trades at the time. There were a few that joined after I had started, but at that particular time I was the only one. So what happened was towards the end of my time there, they decided to move the facility to India. And so it was a union shop, and they
So
began.
how many years has it been since you came on board?
From there, it was 3.5.
So 3.5
started-
years into your career at
Yep.
this company, at this plant, management decided to move things to India.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, and because it was union, everything was based on seniority. So they started laying people off or moving people around based on their seniority. So I was about 200 hours away from my journeyman's card when they decided that I
So
needed
you
to
were
go back
still an
out.
apprentice at that time.
Correct.
Okay.
Where I had to go out on the shop floor, and I wasn't the only one. There were a couple other apprentices that went through the same thing. And so what they had agreed to was that if you could prove that you had worked on some cars or worked on some mechanics that were applicable to the trade outside of work, then they would count those hours towards your journeyman's card because we were all so close. And so they did it for one of my counterparts who was like 50 hours ahead of me. But when I asked, first they said yes, and then they turned around. There was one guy who was not cool with it, and he made a big stink, and he came back and he said, no, we can't do that. She's a liability and this and that. And so they came back to me and said that they weren't going to give me my card after I'd spent all that time doing that work and learning all this. And it would have been really difficult to take that level of training and try and transfer it somewhere else. It was kind of unheard of at that time.
So a couple of things, right? So number one, when you talk about getting a journeyman card, that whole structure was set up by the union. These are the union rules, right? They basically have designations of different ranks, if you will. And it sounds like you were trying to sort of get an exception saying, can I just get the card, even though I'm still just, did you say 200 hours short of getting it? So number one, can you confirm, is that the case?
Yes, but you had to prove that you were doing things. There was a document they had us fill out, and you had to have whoever you were working with outside of there sign and agree that, yeah, this is the case.
Right.
We worked on this together. So it wasn't just, I'm close enough, you should give it to me kind of thing. It was, you had to document kind of where you were at.
Okay. And then the second thing, trying to understand is the hours and the skill sets you've accumulated. It sounds like it's difficult to transfer to a different job somewhere else. Can you elaborate on that part?
Right. So in the industry that we were in, so there were a lot of different, like Ford had apprenticeship programs, GM, all of the big three automakers had apprenticeship programs. A lot of the other bigger facilities in that area had apprenticeship programs, but they had their own kind of rules on how they recruited their apprentices. So you almost had to know somebody in the program in one of those facilities that would be able to help get you into it to apply the hours that you had. Otherwise, you were basically starting out on the line and you would have had to wait and go through the entire beginning of the process and then see if the stuff that you had applied towards their rules. Because there were certain classes and different, because each one had different unions, right? So the steel workers may not be the same as the automotive one. Right. So they're like, as far as classes or specific hours for this or specific hours for that. So it just made it way, way more difficult.
Okay. So which union did you fall under? The steel union?
The steel workers, yes.
Okay, I see. Yeah. So I can understand from a procedural standpoint, if you belong to one union, you want to transfer to another union, there are all these artificial hurdles in place that might make you start all the way from the bottom, which sounds not very attractive to me. At the same time, I think just from a first principle approach, it sounds like this is not the most efficient setup, right? Because theoretically, it's not like if you've worked in steel for a long time, you have to start from the ground up working in the auto industry, right? So if there weren't all these artificial barriers, it would have made job transfers much easier.
Well, and see, that's kind of the crazy thing, right? Is because once you have the journeyman's card, you can go anywhere with it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of like that card says, okay, you at least have that foundational level of what you need to know to do that job. It's almost like a bachelor's degree.
Yeah, I was about to make that analogy. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you don't have that card, it's really hard without starting over somewhere else. And I already had 3.5 years into it.
Okay, got it. All right, so I'll cut you off. Please keep going. So I think we stopped at where you said you were just hours shy of getting your journeyman card, and that didn't work out.
Right. So it was really cool because being the only female there, I kind of built a really cool camaraderie with the guys that worked there. And I felt like towards the end of the apprenticeship, I was being treated as one of the guys. So they came in, I was devastated because they basically told me I wasn't going to be able to get my card. And so the guys stood up and went to the management team and said, you gave this guy his card, give her her card. They have this annual Christmas party and all of the retired journeymans would come, and it was like a big deal to have this Christmas party. And then usually that's when they would hand out the journeyman's cards. It was like a whole tradition, right? So all of the plumbers, the electricians, the tool makers, and the millwrights went to management and said, if you don't give her her card, we're not coming to the Christmas party. Which I thought was really, really cool. And I didn't think that it was going to make a big difference because by this time I was already out on the line, working on the line again. So the day of the party, my old boss came and he's like, hey, come with me for a minute. And so I went with him and we went down in the thing and he handed me the card in front of everybody at the Christmas party. And he's like, here you go, you did it, kid, kind of thing. So it was just kind of a really cool end to a very tough journey in that facility. And then
I mean, without the journeyman card, you would have had to start all over. Your couple hundred hours or however many hours you've accumulated would have sort of gone down the drain. So this was important. But can I ask you, the other journeyman, the other colleagues were saying some other guys were able to get their journeyman card despite having the same sort of qualifications as you. Was that the issue?
Right. So I was very green going into that job compared, some of the guys that have worked there have been working on cars since they were born. So the particular guy that started all of the troubles with the management team had made it very clear to me at different interactions throughout my time there that I didn't belong. Women didn't belong there.
Okay. That's not nice. I mean,
no. No.
Right. Okay. I'm actually quite puzzled about it because it's not like there's a huge supply of talents in this field to start with, right? So they sort of need all the help they can get.
Right.
Where do you think that sort of sexism comes from?
Well, I mean, if you look today, it's still there. And I think it's kind of like an unconscious bias to some degree because you'll still hear, oh, that's women's work, or, oh, women can't do this or women can't do that. And depending on what field you go into. And I know in conversations you and I have had with the skilled trades, it's still painfully apparent partially because the numbers are still so low with women in the trades. It's not an easy environment to work in if you don't have support in that environment. And that's going to be the part that's going to be hard to grow women in those trades until we can get to the point where women feel supported there.
Do you think there's also discrimination against minorities in those environments? I'm just imagining, right? If a place where people blatantly say sexist things or set up barriers so females cannot succeed, do they also have similar sorts of things for underrepresented minorities?
I would say absolutely. I personally didn't experience it while I was there because where that facility was primarily Caucasian. There wasn't a whole lot of minorities there. So I'm sure it absolutely still exists today.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think back if we had a few Hispanic folks that went through the program, but again, it just wasn't very diverse.
Okay, understood. So keep going, please. This is only year one. We need to get to 13 minutes before the hour's up.
Sorry. Okay, so from there, when the plant closed, my husband and I literally loaded up a U-Haul and drove to Florida. We didn't have any ties in Michigan, and the economy there was very difficult to find a job because so many plants were starting to close down.
When was this?
This was in 2004.
Okay. And didn't you say your family's from Michigan? So why didn't
Correct.
you guys have ties in Michigan?
We did. Just not anything that was like, that forced us to, we didn't have like aging parents or anything like that. It was just, and at that particular point, we didn't have kids. So
Okay.
It was an easy transition to just load the U-Haul up. Let's go see what other adventures are out there kind of thing.
So when you guys moved to Florida, did you already have a job in place?
I did not know. My husband's, he had a few uncles that lived there. So he was able to start working right away. And this is actually the longest period on my resume. I went 3 months before I finally got a job. And it was crazy because the culture in Florida versus Michigan, there was still a lot of, like, I remember applying for welding jobs and they flat out told me women don't do that.
Okay. What did your husband do?
He was a carpenter.
Okay. Was he a
So
carpenter back in Michigan as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So he basically moved to Florida, did the same thing.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Just different scenery, different experiences kind of thing.
Okay.
So started there. I started working with Sunrise Medical, and that's where I started down the path of leadership and getting an understanding there. That's where I started learning about lean manufacturing and how to take waste out of processes and improve efficiency and those types of things. So we were there for 2007. We were there for 3 years.
Okay. Sunrise Medical, is this a medical equipment manufacturing company?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that facility, we made custom headsets for wheelchairs and custom seating systems for wheelchairs.
Okay.
So we were down there, and then in 2007, they announced that they were merging with another facility in Kansas City.
Okay.
So they moved us to Kansas City and 2 other families from Florida to Kansas City to help merge in that site. And so I was promoted to production manager. So I owned the entire product line from inventory, setting up the equipment, growing the business, shipping, assembly, all of the different facets of that business for that product line. I owned that portion of the P&L. So when we moved up there, it was kind of fun because I had a very tight window. I had to hire an entire new team, train an entire new team, set all the equipment up, set up the inventory, make sure everything was good. And I was also 6 months pregnant when we moved. With your first child? With my second child. We had our first son in Florida.
Okay.
And so then I had a very tight 3-month window to get everything done. We ended up shipping a week early. I got everything set up, so I was able to go out on maternity leave and enjoy my time with my boys. And then at that facility, I was there for a couple of years, and then they decided to close that facility and move it to Mexico. And at that point, I didn't want to move to Mexico. So I bounced around Kansas City.
Before you go on further, the facility in Florida that got merged with Kansas City, they were merged within the same company, right? These are 2 plants belonging to the same Sunrise Medical company.
Yes.
but they were closing down a floor of the facility.
Yes.
Maybe because of efficiency. Maybe the company was the company downsizing? Was the company not doing well? Is that why they had to merge?
So they were trying to centralize it because they were trying to grow the business on the West Coast. So by combining it with the facility in Kansas City, it was kind of a dual offering because they did more of the custom seating systems at that facility in Kansas City. And then coupled with ours, we could have it'd be like a one-stop shop kind of thing instead of ordering a little bit from over here and ordering a little bit from over there.
Okay. Well, was the company's business growing? Was the company selling more of these products? Did you know that?
Yeah, we were growing. Yeah, we were. Our product was growing. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So anyway, so you went out to Kansas City and you were there for another 3 years, you mentioned?
So we were
they had to close down for Mexico?
They closed it. It was about 1.5 years after I moved there. They closed that one down. And then I bounced around. From there, I went to a company called Inkjet, where they did remanufacturing of inkjet cartridges. And then I went over to Sealy Mattress and I worked there for a little bit. And then AGCO stole me from them and they moved us from Kansas City to North Central Kansas. And that was a huge culture shock. We went from Kansas City is very, very diverse. It's very similar to California. It's a great place to go visit if you haven't. There's all kinds of fun stuff to do. And then we moved to North Central Kansas, which was very rural, very non-diverse. And there I was a production supervisor for the machine shop. So I worked in that facility till, let's see, 2011. And then within that company, I was promoted to a manufacturing engineer and I was moved out to the Baltimore facility in Baltimore. So we moved to Pennsylvania.
Sorry, hold on. So this is ECHO, right? ECCO?
Yes.
What do they do?
AGCO.
AGCO. What do they do?
They build farm equipment. So
AGCO.
AGCO, yep.
Got it.
In the facility in North Central Kansas, we built the implements that go behind the tractors. So like the tills and the discs, the planters, those types of things. Okay. And then in Baltimore, it was an assembly manufacturing. So we did final assembly on tractors, on some of the smaller tractors that came from overseas. Okay. And then would send those out. Okay. So, yeah.
So you became a manufacturing manager. Now, did you need your journeyman license for that or no?
No, but it did come in handy. It was at that facility, I was the manufacturing engineer. So I had 3 sites. I was stationed in the Baltimore facility, but we had a site in Houston, Texas, and a site near Seattle, Washington. So I would standardize in each one of the sites. We did the exact same thing. I would standardize processes and make sure all 3 sites were doing the same things so that quality was good and everybody was getting things at the same time. Everything was the same. And on new product launches, I would go to the different sites and train on the new product launches that we had. And actually, while I was doing that position, I had the opportunity to, we had a facility in China. So that was my first international trip I got to take. It was that was so much fun.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about it. When you went to China, I assume you were looking at manufacturing plants over there. You were meeting local management, and I suppose you guys are exchanging ideas and just being friendly with each other, right? So tell us about that.
Yeah, so they flew us out and we got a day to spend, and it was during a holiday, so the town was kind of shut down.
What city is this, by the way?
I'm gonna butcher the name.
It's okay.
Shenzhou.
It's Shenzhen? Are you sure it's not Shenzhen? Well, how do you spell it?
I'm gonna butcher that as well. I apologize.
It's okay.
I'll send it to you. I'll pull it up and I'll send it to you because if I see it, it'll be. Yeah, I'll pull it up and I'll send it to you in any week.
Okay. Well, where did you fly into? Did you fly into Beijing or Shanghai?
Shanghai. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And then we took a bullet train from there. We took a bullet train from there to there, and it was like I want to say it was about 2 hours on the bullet train.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So yeah, that was one of my favorite experiences. The plant that we had there, it was an AGCO plant. It was fairly new. They'd only been open about a year. And the plant was beautiful. And so we got to go in, and it was kind of really cool because the team that was there to work on the project, we had someone from England, we had someone from Australia, we had several folks from China, we had some folks from Brazil, and then there were a couple different people from different facilities in the United States that were there working on that project
So
together.
AGCO basically had plants all over these different places you just mentioned, and this
Yes.
is basically like a big party of everyone in these different remote offices.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
tell us about the interaction with people in these international offices and interaction with locals.
So it's just so much fun because you get to learn how different your life experiences are to anyone else, because you're kind of getting outside of your bubble. So
did you get to see the assembly lines, the people actually working in the manufacturing plant?
Mm-hmm.
Were there any surprises? Were there any shocks?
Not really. The company did a real good job of trying to standardize a lot of the processes that we had when it comes to that stuff. I think the most shocking part for me, honestly, was when they had a cafeteria, and I wasn't used to the facilities in the United States didn't have a cafeteria. So when we went in there, there was a lady, and then you just got a tray of food, and the folks that worked in the cafeteria didn't speak English, so we just guessed at what we were having for lunch that day. It was kind of just, it was a fun.
Oh, I see. Okay. Whereas in the States, there were no cafeterias. So where would you actually eat usually at these manufacturing plants? Like you just bring your food?
Yeah, you just bring your lunch.
Okay, got it. All right.
Or you buy something out of one of the machines. Some of them have sandwiches or something in the machines.
Have you ever seen this movie, American Factory? I think it's called American Factory. You know the one
I don't
that
think so.
Obama made about this Chinese billionaire coming over to some town in Ohio where they make glass for cars and all that. And they also have factories back in China. And there was a huge cultural clash in terms of Chinese people trying to manage American plants versus the American workers trying to work well with the Chinese management. And they actually did a trip, a China trip for the top managers in the plant. And there was a lot of cultural shock when they went there. I mean, there were literally workers in China lining up at the beginning of the day and chanting these slogans for the good of the company, like they were being managed as an army, a group of soldiers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then the American managers, upon witnessing this, said, hey, let's bring this ritual back to America and have our workers stand in line at the beginning of the day and chant slogans. And that didn't work out because nobody wanted to do it. So I was wondering if you had similar cultural shocks when visiting the Chinese facility. I guess not.
Well, you know, everybody wore uniforms. Everybody had a uniform. And when we asked, we're like, well, how is that uniform different than this uniform? It was to differentiate the workers on the line versus the managers. And it was like a quick reference to be able to tell who to escalate to if there was an issue, which I thought was really cool.
Right. And you guys didn't have that back in the States?
No, there was no dress code or uniform as far as that one. There was a dress code, but there was no like uniform. Okay. So that was kind of neat.
Okay. Was there any kind of comparison in terms of output efficiency between the plants of the different places?
There was. I honestly wouldn't be able to tell you what any of those were at this particular point. Okay. There was always a monthly meeting where the metrics from each of the plants would be reported out, like at a global meeting. Okay. All
right. So then this is AGCO. And how long were you in Kansas before you moved to, hold on, Kansas City is in Missouri, right?
It's on both sides.
On both sides.
Half of the cities in Kansas and half the cities in Missouri.
Got it. So how long were you in Kansas City and North Kansas combined before you moved to Baltimore?
Let's see, 2004 to 2000, 7 years.
7 years.
Between Kansas. Yeah.
Right. And then you went to Baltimore as a result of promotion or as a result of moves within the company?
Yeah, it was a promotion into a different reporting structure, into a different team.
Right. But then you mentioned you were sort of managing 3 different plants in 3 different states. That was Washington, Baltimore, and Kansas, where you had to standardize the protocols and procedures.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So you're working for the same company and just working at a higher level in Baltimore.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Keep going, please.
Correct. Cool. So we were there until 2017, and I got a call from Tesla. I had a recruiter reach out to me from Tesla and say, hey, we think you'd be a great fit on our team. Would you be interested? I thought it was a joke because I was on the East Coast, they're on the West Coast.
Right.
There's billions of people in California and they can't find a supervisor. I'm like,
Right.
Sure. Yeah, I'm interested. Let's hear what you have to say.
Right.
And I went through the interview process with them, and it sounded like a cool opportunity. It was a new part of the country that we haven't been to. So I talked through it with my husband, and he's like, I would love to go to California.
Yeah.
The snow in the Baltimore area is
Right. It's
never
getting too
ending.
much. Yeah.
So yeah, I went through the interview process. I want to say they contacted me in February of 2017, and I was starting May. I started like May 1st
Okay.
out here. So they moved us all the way across the country. And then I was with them for about 2 years. And in that time frame, I finished my master's degree. And once I finished my master's degree, I kind of wanted to really push my career to that next level. And the opportunities at Tesla just weren't there at the time.
Was this a master's degree in Baltimore or no?
I started it in Baltimore. I did it online.
Okay.
Through the University of Alabama. And I started it while I was out there, and I finished it while I was in California.
Okay.
And yeah, once I finished, I got a call from the company I work for now, and it was the exact job I've been going to school for. So I made the transition, and I just celebrated my 2-year mark a few weeks ago.
Okay, great. So you were in Baltimore for how long? And then how long were you in Tesla for?
I was in Baltimore from 2011 until 2017. So 6 years.
6 years. And then you came here to California and you were in Tesla for maybe 1 or 2 years?
For just shy of 2 years. Yep.
Got it. Okay. So tell us about what your thoughts are in terms of moving so frequently. A couple of things. Number one, you obviously go to a place, you develop new relationships and friendships with coworkers and friends. You have to leave those behind when you move. And same thing for your husband, same thing for your kids. How do all of you deal with this?
So we've always moved to where the work is. And every opportunity is presented to the family. It's not just my decision. And so basically, once we left Michigan, we didn't really have any roots anywhere. So the rest after Florida were kind of easy because, yeah, we had friends that we had and we had good connections in all of those different locations, but that's transferable. And it's not like the friendship doesn't go, it doesn't go away. We're just not close to each other anymore, you know? So I think for the kids, they bounce back they're resilient. And now talking to them, it's pretty cool because they recognize the different cultures in all of the different places that we've lived and how there's not two cities in this country where they do things the same way, or people talk the same way, or people have the same beliefs in how things should be done. And so having them have that awareness makes my heart so happy because there's just so many people, you know, even growing up, they've never left where we were born and raised, and there's nothing wrong with that, but their exposure to people that are different than them, they've not had that exposure. And I think there's some really cool, like, ability to empathize with people who are different than you by having that experience, because otherwise you don't know what you don't know kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. Well, how old are your children now?
My oldest just turned 15. And then my middle guy is about to turn 13. And then we have my nephew. We have custody of my nephew, and he is 11.
Okay, so 3 boys.
Yes,
Man,
3 boys.
Like a handful.
Yes.
So how do you feel about what they want to do in the future? So part of the reason why kids today don't want to do blue-collar work or go into the trades is disappearance of these jobs, and maybe also just stigma or they want to become influencers on Instagram or something. What do you think are their aspirations? How would you encourage them in terms of having them decide what they want to do?
This is an awesome topic because my oldest is a freshman in high school. And so we've had to have some real serious conversations about his aspirations because high school is when it starts to count. So you really have to be a little bit more deliberate what you want your path to be if you want to go into med school or something along those lines. But again, he's still a kid. So I'm going to support, we've been very clear, we'll support whatever it is that they want to go into. And I've talked about welding. They all know that I weld. They all know about the skilled trades. They know my story. So I've promoted, you guys don't have to go to college. I'm not cramming that down your throat. If you want to go to trade school and become a plumber or an electrician or a welder or, a journeyman millwright, whatever that looks like, we'll support you in that because personally, if a kid, in my opinion, if a kid is not lock solid and I am going to be this when I grow up, if there's any kind of doubt there, I would much prefer them go into manufacturing, go into the skilled trades, because you're going to get a great foundational career that you'll always be able to feed your family with, and then you can do the school stuff later. So that way you're not going into debt on something you may or may not choose as a career long term. So with him in the last year and a half or so, he had a career day at his school, and when he came home, he was all excited. He wanted to be a neurosurgeon. And so we spent 6 months researching all of the things he would need to be or need to accomplish to get accepted into a neurosurgeon program. And then he comes back when he's picking his classes for high school, and they had an ag class, and he's like, I think I'm going to take this because I hear that you get to, yes. Yep. I hear you get to weld in that class, and that sounds fun. And I was like, yay, that would be awesome. So he came home and he's like, we just had this conversation like last week, and he's like, Mom, what if I went into welding? Would that be okay? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I was like, you could go into welding, do a trade school. If your high school doesn't offer it through like VOTEC, you could be certified in like 18 months or less.
What is VOTEC?
Vocational training.
Oh, got it. Okay.
A lot of the high schools will have that type of program.
That's the program that sends kids into trades. For listeners
Correct.
that don't understand what it means.
Yep.
Vocational training. I think it's
Yes.
also called technical career or career.
Yeah,
training.
that may be what they call it out here. Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, I was like, yeah, jump right in, bud, if that's what you want to do. And we're still working on our house. I want to get a welder so I can teach him how to do some of this stuff and get him just more prepared. But I was like, heck yeah, you can go right into that. The world needs more welders. So that's his current aspiration. I don't know. He is a teenage boy, so that might change next week.
Right. Totally understood. And I guess your two other kids are probably too young to fully comprehend what this all means.
Yeah, well, so as far as like a serious career choice, my middle guy has talked about going into law enforcement. My dad and my sister are in law enforcement, so it's kind of a path that a lot of my family has taken. My youngest guy's, yes. And my youngest guy, right now, he wants to be a professional basketball player. So
Okay.
that's just kind of where we're at on the spectrum for career choices.
Okay, gotcha. So I think one issue some kids might have about going into trades once they become a little bit older is the instability or perceived instability, right? In your own story, you had to move to, I'm counting at least 2 times to different states because of closure or merger of factories or plants that you've been in. So I think some young people understandably have qualms about going into the trades when their jobs can just get shipped away or get automated or something like that. And the argument for them to go into college is that they might have more transferable skills. They might be able to get more stability in their careers. What do you think about that perspective?
Right. So my story is a little unique in the fact that I didn't need to leave the states I was in. It was more just like, hey, let's go see what's going on in this state. I wasn't
So there's
tied
something
to those
adventurous
states.
about you were saying.
Yeah.
You could have just stayed in Michigan, for example.
Yeah, I could have stayed. And a lot of the folks that I went through the apprenticeship program with did stay in Michigan and have careers still in the trades. So, it may have been a struggle for a year or 2 or 3 or whatever during that time, but they all eventually ended up in their trade in that state. So there may be a rough patch. That was kind of a weird downturn with the economy. Now, I will say a lot of the guys that I went through those programs with also were able to make money on the side because they could work on cars or they could weld something up for somebody and make that side money.
Okay. Are there platforms to do that? Do they have to work for a machine shop or auto shop?
Nope.
Are you talking about like literally posting ads on Craigslist?
Well, just like you and I would be talking and you'd be like, oh, my car won't start. And I'd be like, hey, I know how to fix that. And I'd come over and just fix it and be like, hey, give me, $200 or something like that.
Oh, I see. Word of mouth. So
Yeah.
then people are like, hey, John, he just fixed my car. You can ask him to do this, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. How do you think these moves affected your kids? I understand they have more diverse perspectives now, but having to ditch their friends and make completely new friends, especially since you have 3 of them, how do they get to be so resilient?
So when we moved to California and we sat down and talked about, making this move, they specifically asked, can this be the last one? And now that my oldest has started high school, this will be the last one until they all complete high school. We won't move to another state until they're done with high school because high school is hard anyways, just in the dynamics of what is high school and trying to add multi-state moving into that mix. We all decided as a family that it would be important to make sure that they had that last chunk for them. So we're stuck in California for at least 6 years.
Okay, got it. Understood. To be honest, it almost feels like kids are going to be as resilient as you make them. Mm-hmm. If you have to move, they will follow you, right? So now, I think in your case, you are a bit of a venturesome soul, I suppose, and somehow you're able to convince your husband and your kids to move along with you. And I don't know, maybe there's some DNA in you that gets passed to the kids and they just are okay with completely starting over as well. So, well, anyway, thank you very much for coming on the show, Erin.
Thank you. This has been fun.
Cool, Erin. Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah, have a great weekend.
Okay, have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.